Hey there, creative people. Welcome to the podcast. My name is Ryan Leacock, and this is the podcast for people who just have to go for it. This week, I'm talking to former musical director and conductor David Loud. David spent 34 years working in the theaters on Broadway and now is a teacher of musical theater. He tells me about his time in the middle of all of it and working with some of the best, including Stephen Sondheim, who unfortunately we lost last week. David also tells me about how everything changed when he got his diagnosis of Parkinson's disease and what he learned through that process. It is a really special chat. You are in for a treat. It was really an honor to kind of get to know him and chat with him for a little bit. So it's a good one today. How's everyone doing? Doing okay? I'm doing all right. A little bit melancholy, but I'm cozied up in the studio on this snowy afternoon. It's my birthday on Monday, and I actually just realized it's David Loud's birthday. It was David Loud's birthday today, so Sunday. So happy birthday, David. Also, shout out to Josh from Mixed Media Sound, my friend. Him and I share the same birthday on Monday, so happy birthday, Josh. Personally, my wife is quite the baker, so I've been mostly eating cheesecake all weekend, and I'm feeling full and grateful and loved. All right, well, that's enough from me. That's enough of my nonsense. Let's get into it with David Loud.
Hello.
Hi, David. How are you doing?
Very good. Very good. And you?
Good. I'm doing well. It's nice to meet you.
You too.
Yeah, I'm really glad Madeline reached out, and I'm looking forward to this. I was just reading through your bio, and it's always a good sign when, as I'm looking through, I'm like, oh, I want to ask him this. So that's where I'm at right now. How's the day going so far?
So far, so good. Mornings are kind of hard for me.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of going on, sort of health-wise.
Yeah.
And I tend to get more comfortable during the day.
Okay.
But I'm feeling okay now.
All right. Do you have any questions for me before we get in?
No, I think your prep info was very clear, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Awesome. All right. So whenever you're ready, love you to introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Hi, I'm David Loud. I'm currently a teacher at the Manhattan School of Music. I teach musical theater in a brand new program that we founded 5 years ago there.
Nice.
And my career in New York was as a music director for Broadway shows. Mm-hmm. I spent 34 years doing that.
Yeah. Until
I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and 8 shows a week are pretty hard to reconcile. So I eased away from conducting and became a teacher, and couldn't be happier.
Oh.
Teaching, to my surprise. It's just as fulfilling, and it was not where I ever thought I was headed. My parents are both teachers, and somehow that seemed to be in store for me.
Yeah. What I like to do with the podcast is start kind of at the beginning and kind of bring people up to speed to where your creative journey has led you so far. So let's start when you were younger. When did you know that you were creative, like that you had that itch?
I knew as soon as I started hearing my parents' original cast albums that were in their little collection on their record player. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and in our living room was this little cabinet of LPs, and they had, Oklahoma and Carousel and West Side Story and Bye Bye Birdie and Brigadoon and Bells Are Ringing and Fiorello, and just a sort of normal middle-class collection of original Broadway cast recordings. And I thought they were the most wonderful things in the world.
Yeah.
And I thought Broadway was one theater where they had all played.
Yeah.
And I would just listen to them over and over and over. And I thought, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do. I have to get there.
Yeah.
I don't know why it struck me so sort of centrally, but it did. And you hear that over and over and over from people who are obsessed with musical theater, that it was the cast albums
Yeah.
that lit that flame. And so I was about 6 when that started.
6, yeah.
And I never wavered.
No.
That's just where I wanted to be.
Wow. That's a cool thing that from in such a young age be like, I'm going that way.
It's a little strange, and that it never, turned off into something else.
Yeah. It's easy to get distracted, right?
Right. I mean, maybe there was 15 minutes when I wanted to be a Supreme Court justice, but really, it's just been Broadway.
Yeah. So how did that play out? Like at that time, did like Ohio feel like the world away, or?
Look, I had to get out of there. I just had to get out of there.
Yeah.
And we ended up, my family moved to Lake Placid, New York.
Okay.
And my father was teaching at this wonderful school that is on an organic farm up in the Adirondacks. And the focus of the school is, connecting students to the earth.
Yeah.
And mountain climbing and being rugged and resourceful. And I was just a fish out of water. I wanted to be doing tap dances and show tunes. And so it was a challenge for me to make it through that kind of school experience. But one of my grandmothers lived in New York, and she loved the theater. And I figured out that I could save all my money and take the Greyhound bus down to New York City and sleep on her couch for a week. And we would see 8 shows together. And, that became my little sort of self-educating pod where I could learn about New York and the real world and life in the theater.
Yeah. So how old were you when you first saw your first Broadway show?
I was 11 when I saw The Magic Show on Broadway, which is a show by Stephen Schwartz that starred Doug Henning as a magician. And it has a wonderful score. And well, I thought it was the best thing I'd ever seen in my life. I can still remember every single second of the show.
Yeah.
It was staggeringly influential in making me who I was.
Yeah.
I loved it. There was this funny thing where there was a drab magician's assistant who was in love with the magician.
Yeah.
The magician conjured up the most beautiful girl in the world, who, because that's what magicians can do.
Yeah.
And he sawed her in half, and the drab assistant stole the bombshell's legs. And so the pretty girl was like wheeling around for the whole second act, trying to find her legs. I thought that was hilarious.
Oh, that's great. So was it a high school that was this like rugged high school? Like
It's a boarding school for 4th through 8th graders.
Okay.
Very young.
Yeah.
I went away to prep school for high school. I went to Phillips Exeter in New Hampshire, which had a great theater department and a wonderful teacher who just taught us as if we were professionals, expected us to behave like professionals in his shows, and it was very rigorous and completely influential to me.
Yeah.
I went to Yale after that, and I had this piece of good luck in my life, which was I was cast in the original Broadway production of Merrily We Roll Along when I was 18, which is completely the most unlikely thing that could ever have happened. This was the new Stephen Sondheim, Hal Prince show after Sweeney Todd.
Okay.
I went to an open call that they had in New York, and somehow was cast in the show. I wasn't pursuing a career as a professional actor at that time at all. I was a sophomore at Yale, and I found out about the production and went in for it, and it was the most extraordinary experience. It was a big bomb. It ran 2 weeks after we opened, but the process of getting to watch Stephen Sondheim, Hal Prince, George Firth, Paul Gimignani work in rehearsal, and then realizing that it wasn't connecting to the audience, trying to fix it over the 5 weeks of previews. There is no better education I could ever have hoped to get than watching these people try to fix this flawed musical.
That's amazing.
It was a heartbreaking experience, but such a wonderful one too at the same time. I highly recommend starting your career with a flop.
Yeah.
Because then when you get something that actually runs and works, you know the value of it.
Yeah. Well, what I love about everything you just said is like you really got to see, the whole scope. You saw the heartache, you saw the magic when you were like you were schooled in like the whole scope of it, right? And then you went and you had a teacher that treated you professional. So you learned very early. This is a lot of hard work, right? But that didn't take away from the magic for you. And then you saw the hard work and the emotional hard work of something bombing. Like you got at a very early age pretty much the whole scope of like how to handle going forward in that industry.
It's true. And the Merrily experience was such a yin yang. One night we were opening, to a standing ovation and Hollywood stars and a big party at the plaza. And then we read the papers the next morning and we were out on our asses.
So
I went back to Yale after that.
Yeah.
I finished my degree. I thought I was taking 2 years off. It turned out to be just one semester.
Yeah. And
then I sort of had realized during the Merrily experience that I didn't necessarily belong on stage in the theater. And there was a wonderful music director who was the conductor of Merrily. His name is Paul Geminiani, and I sort of thought, I kind of want to be him. I want to be the guy down on that podium. He looks like he's having such a great time, and it's a very special place to be, the podium of a Broadway show. And so I changed my focus and I decided to, apply to summer theaters as a pianist.
Yeah.
So I did summer stock at the Surflight Summer Theater on Long Beach Island, where we did 12 shows in 12 weeks with no day off, 2 summers.
Wow.
It was a great way to learn repertoire.
Yeah.
And a great way to do some really bad shows and some really good shows. Every now and then they'd be very good. Most of them were pretty bad. But then I moved back to New York in '84 as a music director and really pursued that and did that for over 30 years and just loved it. Couldn't have been happier. I mean, to be on the podium conducting a Broadway show is like you're the nerve center of an entire organism.
Yeah.
You're literally the beating heart of this organism that exists to tell a story.
Yeah.
You have the cast in front of you, all lit up. You have the orchestra below you, all packed into the pit.
Yeah.
And you have the audience behind you, and you can feel them on your neck. And you're the center of it all.
Oh my gosh.
It's a thrilling place to be.
Yeah.
And a difficult one too. You're constantly getting input and having to make decisions about tiny little things and huge things at every single moment. But I loved my career doing that.
Yeah. Like when people talk, like actors talk about being on the stage and getting the applause, or like you're getting like that times 3 because you're getting that experience. You're getting like we go to the theater and we get moved by the music of like music moves us, and then you're having the audience behind you. Like, how was it living at that? Like, that's a high that you're experiencing all the time. How was life like? How did you live like that? Like, it sounds amazing, but it sounds like exhausting a little bit too,
and addictive. I mean,
yeah.
Wanting that kind of glow and thrill. It's exhausting. It's an exhausting life also because, I mean, when a musical is running in New York, if you're lucky, you get a wonderful couple of years out of it, and that means that you are, as a music director, running orchestra, brush-up rehearsals, and teaching new cast members, and auditioning, and dealing with the understudy. I mean, it's a 24-hour animal that can just eat you alive. Mm-hmm. And you have to protect yourself. I wasn't always so good at that. I got a little run down every now and then. But it's a great life. And I mean, the treacherous thing about a life in show business is that every show closes and you're back to square one eventually. And I never hooked in with one of those shows that just ran forever. You know, I had great luck and great good fortune, but the longest run I conducted on Broadway was 2 years, which was the run of Ragtime.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of starting over
Mm-hmm.
and putting all your hopes on a new project.
Another emotional high and low.
Exactly. But as a result of my not sort of getting stuck on, you know, some people have done 20 years on Lion King. You know,
Yeah.
they have probably more money than I have and job security. But I got to work with a lot of different composers and new writers and some very established writers.
Yeah.
I got to work with John Kander and Fred Ebb a lot. I did curtains for them and Steel Pier and The Visit.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
a show called Then the World Goes Round that we put together off Broadway of their songs, the Scottsboro Boys. And I continued my relationship with Stephen Sondheim as well.
Yeah.
After Merrily, which was a real treat. I did Company in New York for him, Sweeney Todd, and also Sondheim on Sondheim, which was a review we created of his songs.
That sounds like it's an amazing experience, that like amazing life you got to live. You know, I know we were.
Oh, true.
Yeah, the hard
true.
stuff
So lucky.
too, but like to be there and to be like just in the center, that sounds incredible.
And to have the privilege of working with the people that you idolize.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'll never understand how that worked out in my life. That my favorite composer team, you know, production team, turned out to be the one that I got to learn the business from.
Yeah, that's incredible.
It was incredible.
Did you ever feel like an imposter along the way?
In the original cast of Merrily, yes, I did feel like somebody a mistake has been made.
Yeah.
Clearly a mistake has been made.
Yeah.
When I looked around at the actors and saw what they could do, I couldn't quite do that. I could play the piano, and they needed somebody who could play the piano, which is one of the reasons I got the part.
Yeah.
So I played the piano on stage during Merrily. But I didn't have the acting talent that most of the kids in that company had.
But then it seemed like you pivoted pretty quickly. You're like, oh, well, that's my spot then, and just moved there.
Exactly. Yes. Luckily, I found where I was supposed to be.
Yeah. Do you have any recommendations to younger people who are coming up, like to how to handle kind of that time?
Well, you certainly want to just treasure it and learn as much as you can from the people around you. And if you get the opportunity to work with the heavy hitters that early in your career, pay attention.
Yeah.
When we were teching Merrily, which is this endless process of, you know, going through the show bit by technical bit, there were these big turntables that were very complicated in Merrily.
Okay.
And most of the actors would go back to their dressing rooms between times they had to be on stage, and I would always just circle around and go to the back of the theater and just watch as much as I could.
Interesting.
Sitting there in the dark, trying to figure it all out and see how crises were dealt with and see when great ideas took hold and things got better or fixed. I really paid attention.
I like that a lot. That it seems like a very natural thing. You're just saying, oh, I'm not feeling like I'm fitting in here. And then you're just paying attention to what you were paying attention to. And then you just move towards that. It sounds like it was organic and nice.
Yeah. Well, I always loved playing the piano, and I was able a couple of times in my career to find roles where they needed a pianist. I did a show called Billy Bishop Goes to War, which is a Canadian play. You're Canadian, right?
I am Canadian, yes.
Has that show ever shown up on your radar?
It hasn't. I'm
written by two Canadians, and it's about Billy Bishop, the World War I Canadian flying hero.
Okay.
And it's performed by an actor who plays like 18 parts.
Oh, wow.
And a pianist who sings with him a little bit and plays the piano and is a scene partner when necessary.
Yeah.
And Scott Ellis and I did that at the Portland Stage Company. And it was such a cheap show that all these regional theaters heard about our production, and they would cancel their production of, Twelfth Night, some large cast event, and they would hire us instead. We did it for 2 years all around the country.
Wow.
All we needed was a chair and a piano and 2 World War I Canadian flying uniforms.
Yeah.
But it was a great show. That, for me, that show is is a show that only requires the actors. That's the only thing that's necessary in it. There are no effects. There's no extra stuff. It's just the actors, and because it's one actor playing 18 characters.
Yeah.
It happens in the audience's imagination.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually happen on stage. They see 3 or 4 people having a conversation when there's really only one. But we would find ways of differentiating between his characters using music, physical signs, vocal signs.
Yeah.
And sometimes it would seem like there were 4 or 5 people on stage.
Yeah.
It was quite remarkable when you can access that, the imagination of the audience.
Yeah.
To help create a view.
It's like so stripped down. It's like the magic, but in the smallest form, Tell me your perspective on creating that illusion, because there's big musical, you were just talking about one with all these, that the technical rehearsals will go on forever. But then this one is just like, there's none of that stuff. It's just you guys, right? Talk about kind of those 2 worlds.
That's funny. When I conducted Ragtime on Broadway, Ragtime had both of those elements, actually. It was quite large scenically. It had a huge company. There were 58 people on stage, 28 in the orchestra. And there were big, there was the Crime of the Century, which is this big ludicrous trial of Evelyn Nesbit, swinging through the air, and lots of tech and stuff. But there were also moments like Audra McDonald kneeling on a completely empty stage, just a couple feet away from me where I was conducting, singing her song, "Your Daddy's Son," where she's apologizing to her infant.
Yeah.
It was just the actor, and that's the only thing that, it was like a close-up in the middle of this huge void. Or Marin Maisie singing Back to Before. Again, just one actor on stage, barely any scenery. She was barefoot. You knew she was on the beach.
Yeah.
And that was a real feat, I think, combining big spectacular tableaus that were, sort of eye candy for the audience, and also then the simple theatrical moments that force you to use your imagination.
Yeah.
That's rare, though. That would be a hard balance to pull off over and over. I can't think of other shows necessarily that have done that quite so successfully.
Which do you like the most? Do you have a preference at all?
Oh, I always go for the little.
Yeah.
I love musicals in small spaces that are intimate and just about the actors. But I guess you make a little bit more money with the big shows.
That's the cruel, ironic twist. Your favorites don't bring the big bucks.
It explains my bank account.
Talk to me about working and at times managing so many different people and creative people and so many different personalities. I'm sure aside from the highs and lows, it's also exhausting just dealing with people.
Well, musical directors on Broadway shows are the great collaborators.
Yeah.
We have to work in so many directions. I teach the music. I coach the actors in how they're going to sing.
Yeah.
And so you sort of become a teacher and a father figure or an authority figure in terms of the music for the show.
Yeah.
And I collaborate with the director on how it's all going to work. Are we doing scene change music here? Is this going to go dry here? Is there underscoring? I work with the choreographer.
Yeah.
Make sure the dance music is right. Make sure that tempos are happening so that the dancers can flow. I deal with the musicians and that whole world of helping to choose them and then keep them tame and behaving during a long run.
Yeah. And
since I'm conducting every show, I'm part performer and part creative team. I'm sort of in the middle, wearing both hats at the same time. For me, it's about collaborating and getting everybody on the same page musically to try to realize the composer's vision for the show. You know, is this a rock score? Is that the kind of voice that the cast has to have? Is it a legit score? Do we need 7 sopranos to pull off that, the big ending of that number that is so high? All those things that vary from show to show. Try to make this particular vision come true. And make sure that we're all doing the same show. It's one of the hardest things, I think, on the big shows. And it can all go wrong so easily if you're not all aiming in the same direction. Listening to where other people are going with this show. I think that's the biggest challenge.
I like that about all making the same show. Like, what have you learned about people over all those years working with people?
Well, my social life is my work life. You know, I love actors. I love creative people. I like that world of people who have decided that art is more important than a comfortable lifestyle. Which is inspiring to me, that you put your creative desires above your creature comforts. It's been so hard for the creative community in New York during this pandemic, with no work and no way to make money, and I just see so many people struggling now, and it just breaks my heart how hard our community was hit by this. And we seem to be sort of the last ones back on the bus. I mean, thank God Broadway is starting to open up, but it seems still a little bit shaky to me.
And it's tough because it's like you didn't make it a priority, and then kind of got like double whammied by like
exactly. Your life is hard now. Where do you see this?
What have you learned about people getting through stuff like that?
Well, you can't stop people from doing theater. That was clear during the pandemic. I mean, how many painfully earnest Zoom plays, came zooming across our laptops over this last year and a half. You can't stop people from trying to do it.
I love that.
Every now and then there was something great that you would see on the Zoom, and I would always get very emotional. And now, sort of coming out of hiding, like suddenly finding yourself, in a room where somebody's actually singing and there's a piano, and there hasn't been some, extraordinary technical thing that made it happen. It's just a real thing of, in the air you can hear your partner. It's so powerful now to having had it taken away from us. It's interesting how much we had taken for granted. There was a big problem I'm a pianist and I accompany sort of instinctively, but we couldn't do that over Zoom. You had to record things, and then the singer would record on top of that. It was very complicated to make music because of the delay. There were ways that people eventually started to solve that, but it never got perfect, I don't think. But that was something that I certainly had taken for granted. I hadn't thought, oh, what a privilege, every time I sat down at the piano and somebody was in the room singing. But now it seems like an honor to have that in my life again.
Those first experiences when you're first at your Broadway show, it's like the little seed of just like, oh my gosh, it's like the pure magic at that point. You get to feel it again because of the pandemic, and it's been so hard, but I keep hearing this from people in their own fields, and it has given me hope for when we feel like things are shitty and hard. It's like, remember that part. That's what I'm trying to take from it.
Absolutely right. I couldn't agree more. And we do take things for granted.
Yeah.
And to be refreshed in that appreciation and pleasure is inspiring.
Yeah.
I've written a book.
I wanted to talk about that.
Oh, good. It's called Facing the Music, and it's about my experience on Broadway as a music director, and also sort of the teachers who got me there.
Yeah.
And I read a couple chapters of it the other day in a small theater, and I had two singers with me, and they sang songs that I referenced in the chapters. And it was just one of those experiences of the audience was sort of hanging on every word because it was so intimate, and the singers were so good. It was Liz Calloway and Matt Scott, and they, like, I read a chapter from about the opening night of Curtains, one of the shows I conducted, and then Matt sang one of the songs from Curtains, and chapter about She Loves Me, and Liz Calloway sang Really Like Me from She Loves Me, and then I read my chapter about Ragtime, and they sang Our Children.
Yeah.
And the intimacy of it with the audience was so potent. And I know that they were seeing like live performance probably for the first or second time since the pandemic. And it was interesting to learn again how powerful it is to do something simple and intimate and let the audience use their imaginations.
Yeah. And like hold that space with you. It's what you're saying with the piano and like people in the room. Like, yeah. Talk to me about, when did this book start to kind of form in your mind? I'm like, I want to do this.
I was invited back to the North Country School, which is the organic farm that I sort of grew up on, and they asked me to do a commencement speech 6.5 years ago. They wanted about 10 minutes, and I did 40 with 2 songs instead. I like put on a big event. And
they should have known what they were getting into.
They shouldn't. Yes, this is showbiz. It went very well, and there was a woman who came up to me after it and said, "You should turn this into a book." I thought that was very nice of her, and I moved on to the next person who wanted to talk to me.
Yeah.
And this woman, Judith Regan, found my husband and said, "David doesn't realize who I am, but I am a publisher, and I'm quite successful. And I think he should call me because I think I would like to work on a book with him."
Oh, that's so good.
And she gave my husband her card, and so he started talking to her. And finally,
thank God,
yes. A couple of days later, I ended up in her very nice Soho office, and she is indeed a successful publisher, and she thought it should be a book, and ever since I've been writing and rewriting.
Yeah.
So it's finally done, and it does spring from that speech that I gave up there, but it's evolved into a much sort of larger event. It's called Facing the Music, and it's a memoir about my time conducting and also being diagnosed with Parkinson's and meeting my husband and our marriage. And it's been a great experience writing it, and a new one. I mean, that was a new skill to learn.
Yeah.
At this age, in my 50s, but so pleasurable to wake up in the morning and know that I have a couple of hours to work on the book, and I would start writing, knowing that I was going to get to this point and find that I was just writing about something completely different.
Yeah.
I was led through the book somehow.
Nice.
I did 2 major, like, top to finish overhauls of it.
Oh, wow.
After I thought it was done, and discovered that it wasn't, and then discovered again that it wasn't.
Oh my gosh.
But I couldn't be happier with it now.
Yeah.
and it's being published February 1st,
Nice.
and it's available for pre-order on Amazon anytime.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So like the book process was about 6 years, like process of
6.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
writing it. And
That's
very pleasurable.
yeah. But it's like a long haul too.
But it was much longer than I
Yeah.
dreamed that it could take. I mean, how long could it take to write a book?
Is that
Well,
what
I guess a long time.
Yeah, that's what you thought though at the beginning. Like, oh, how long? I could kick that out in half a year.
Exactly.
When did you get your diagnosis?
It was 2007.
Yeah.
I was conducting a show called Curtains on Broadway,
Mm-hmm.
and I had this shoulder problem that I couldn't sort out what it was from. I figured it was a conducting injury,
Yeah.
but I couldn't really explain it. And I went to a physical therapist who, worked and kept me limber enough to keep conducting the show, but we could never really figure out what the problem was. And finally he said to me, "I think you should see a neurologist." And I was like, why on earth would I see a neurologist about my shoulder?
Yeah.
But he seemed to know what he was talking about, and I went to this neurologist, and I walked into his office, and he said, "How long have you had Parkinson's?"
Whoa.
And I didn't know what Parkinson's was,
Oh my goodness.
but he just knew by looking at me. He said that that's what I had.
Whoa.
It was a shocking way to find out, and he was a strange doctor in a number of ways, but he turned out to be right. And my immediate reaction was, well, nobody can ever find out about this because I must work. I mean, work is all I have. It's who I am.
Yeah.
This secret has to be protected because I won't be hired. So I tried to hide it for a couple of years, and that was just awful.
Yeah.
Because people knew something was wrong, and people knew what was wrong, and
Yeah.
I was pretending that they didn't know, and so they would sometimes pretend that they didn't know. It was a very uncomfortable time, and finally I had to deal with that reality of telling people, yes, as has become obvious, I'm physically compromised, don't have the energy or the range or the speed or the focus that I had before, and help. It was a very rewarding thing to experience people's actual response, which was not what I thought it was going to be, well, so sorry your career is over, but rather, well, can you supervise instead of conduct? Can you help make arrangements? Can you consult? How can we accommodate you?
Yeah.
People were so loyal and so kind. It turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me. To learn that and to see people's compassionate and appreciative, honest reaction. The fear of the exposure was so much worse than the actual disease itself.
Yeah. In like those 3 years. Yeah.
Oh, that was terrible. Yeah. Trying to be who you are not, it just doesn't work, no matter how hard you try.
Yeah.
And I was in situations where, I was playing piano and not being able to play well, which, killed me and gypped the audience and confused the performers I was with. And it was terrible. Mm-hmm. But discovering myself as a teacher was a complete surprise and joy.
Yeah.
There happened to be this new theater program founding itself at Manhattan School of Music, which has never had a musical theater department. And so I'm part of the sort of founding faculty of this new program and just love it. I teach a year-long course on the history of musical theater, and I work on song performance with the actors, and I just love it. It's great.
Yeah. Talk to me about being led towards that, like what led towards, and like as things started to change and you said that it was one of the best things that ever happened to you. When did the light start to come back in, and what did that look like?
It's difficult to talk about because the light is also, I mean, Parkinson's is a continuing degenerative disease that Parkinson's doesn't get easier, but the shedding of the burden of secrecy was a big event.
Yeah.
And I sort of told people one by one, and each conversation was so personal and rewarding, and that kind of intimacy where you are, telling the truth about yourself creates an intimacy in the other person that I felt so much more bonded to my friends and colleagues after that experience than I ever had before. There's so many things that I'm actually grateful to the disease for, things like that. It happened in my marriage too, that the disease forced us to confront issues that we had been ignoring and suppressing and not dealing with. Gave us the honesty and the intimacy to move forward. It's a strange thing to be grateful for, but that feeling in itself is such a relief that that I'm not at war with the disease completely. I can say, well, you did this for me at least.
Yeah. How did it affect your creativity?
So far, not at all.
Yeah.
I still play, I still arrange. Writing was such a joy.
Yeah.
It affects my stamina.
Yeah.
And there are parts of the day that are just wasted time because I don't have the focus or the energy to do anything. That's become a challenge, is using my time effectively and resenting the time that I can't be a part of a social situation or work at home. It's like finding that there are only 16 hours in a day, and trying to pack it all in becomes very challenging.
For sure.
The creativity, for me, it's like a fountain. It's just, it's there. Yeah. And I can always, sometimes I can go back to a project I for some reason put aside a year and a half ago. I can tap into what I was thinking then. And it's like no time has passed. I feel like I'm very lucky that way.
Yeah.
There's always something burbling, some idea, some dream.
Is it from you, or is it from the project, or is it both? Like,
I think it's it's from the project, and it's from me, and it's when they mix that it happens.
Yeah.
If you get the idea, I'm going to do, an evening of George Gershwin songs, something like that, and find a way to make the arrangements fresh and today, but still honor the originals. So, and then my brain is going, and I'm on that project, and I want to make it happen, and I can do it. And I feel like I'm not always in charge of what I'm creating. One thing I love to do in concerts is to take 3 songs that are separate, that are written for different projects or something, and combine them in a way. You sing each one of them, and then sing the 2 of them together, and put the 3rd one in, and sort of braid them together into these, I call them trios, and they're very powerful to see 3 singers do that, and they're very hard to sing. You hold your own part, and sometimes you're singing the song, and then you're singing another version of the song that sounds like the song, but has to be adjusted to fit with the other tunes. And I start these trios, and I don't know where they're going to go, and they I don't plan them,
Yeah.
and they sort of wind and they tell me where they're going to go.
Yeah.
That is a great feeling, because I feel like I'm tapping into something mysterious.
Yeah.
That I don't know how to particularly control or supervise. I just transcribe what needs to be done.
Yeah. It's kind of like being in the middle, like what you were talking about before, like you get to kind of experience an idea and like be along with it. And then you're not totally in control of it. It's like standing on the podium, like all this stuff's happening around of you.
Right.
It's not total. It's in like you're controlling it, but you're not.
You're trying to control it.
Yeah, yeah.
In theory, you're controlling it, but so many things. Conducting it from that spot, you're constantly reacting to what is happening. You have to stay in the present tense. That was something I learned very late in my career. Was how to be making the music tonight for the first time, that with these musicians, for this audience, for those actors, to stay in the present tense. That was a big discovery for me, that I wasn't trying to repeat what we had done last night. I was doing it now.
Yeah.
It seems obvious, but it took me 40 years to figure that out.
What's the main change between once you figured that out? Like, how did it change you?
It seemed to make everybody in the theater happier and more interested in making music together.
Yeah.
The fact that I could, I don't know if that's true or not, but it seemed to me like everybody paid attention more and was more present for me, because I was sort of demanding that they be present tonight. And
yeah,
it was on a show called The Visit that happened to me. It was the last show I conducted on Broadway. Chita Rivera was the star. And Chita is like that. Chita is there to perform that night and for this audience. And it was a great, the show was not successful, but it was one of the best experiences I ever had, just from sort of learning that and learning what it could be to make music in the present tense.
Yeah. I want to let you go soon. I just have a couple more questions. And one of them is kind of about balancing the two worlds of success. And, you just said that show wasn't successful, but it was successful for you personally.
100%, yes.
Living in those two worlds, how have you managed that? That it can be, I'm sure, difficult.
Well, in show business, there's never any correspondence between your financial life and your artistic life.
Yeah.
I could be paid huge amounts of money for some easy, stupid job that I don't really want. I could be paid nothing and have the most fantastic creative experience I could ever have.
Yeah.
The financial success of a show can be completely different from the experience. Mostly, I've had extraordinary experiences on shows with great artists who I love and respect. And I haven't had great financial. I never got one of those big gusher shows. But every now and then you get both, and then
that's the best.
Well, it should be the best, but they aren't really related.
No,
they aren't really related.
I mean, I guess it's the best. Like you're like, well, I don't have to worry about the bank account as much now.
Well, that's always a relief in New York to have a show that you can be confident in.
Yeah.
But the artistic enjoyment is so separate from that.
Yeah.
And perfectly wonderful shows that I've done have gone nowhere.
Yeah.
And some mediocre ones, have done ran much longer than I ever thought they should.
Yeah.
I guess the real challenge is not being in control of that. You're constantly at the mercy of, I guess, what's popular now, what the audience's taste is now. Do the producers have enough money to make it through January? Did it get the Tony Award nominations that it needed to get X amount of publicity? I can't control any of that.
No.
You know, I can control the music on the show.
Yeah.
That's it. And I do my best and try to keep that in the best possible shape. But ultimately, that's not going to keep the show open or close it if I do a terrible job. You know?
Yeah. Artistically, though, how do you manage moments where you're like, I thought that was great and it didn't connect with people? It seems like
so sad.
It's so sad.
It's so sad when that happens. And you think, I just did this. I remember I made this wonderful arrangement. I did a show called The Look of Love, which was all Burt Bacharach songs, and I'd done some really cool arrangements. I thought that show was so bad, nothing about it worked, and that's a lot of creative juice that went into something that was just never going to work. The material wasn't theatrical, and it just didn't work.
So what do you do the day after you move on from a show like that? You're just
so hard.
Oh, man.
So
yeah,
hard
I can't even imagine.
Hard.
Yeah,
and keep going.
Yeah,
especially if you don't have something else planned.
Yeah.
Certainly, by the time I did that show, I had enough of a network of writers who, you know, would like to use me if I were free, and directors who would like to use me if I were free. And I don't think I was unemployed for too long, but it's yeah, as heady as the thrills of theater are, the disappointments can be so crushing. And it's that swing back and forth that really, it's an exercise in humility and also learning to experience the joy when you have it.
Yeah.
You know, and celebrate it and enjoy it, because chances are you're going to end up, you know, singing the blues in a couple weeks.
Yeah. David, I've loved listening to you. I'm looking forward to your book. I've really enjoyed you being, you know, just so honest and kind of open with me and vulnerable. One of the things I like to ask at the end of the episode is just, what was the last thing that you experienced that you like loved, like a show or a moment? We talked a little bit about it, but
when I was a kid, we took a field trip from my high school to see Sweeney Todd on Broadway.
Yeah,
the original cast. And Sweeney Todd has always been one of my favorite shows, and I remember seeing it for the first time in the Uris Theater, and seeing Angela Lansbury and Len Cariou and hearing that amazing score for the first time. And during the pandemic, I taught a class in sort of taking in Sweeney Todd, and I took my students through the score and showed them all the amazing things that Sondheim had created in the score, and the way little motifs repeat that are attached to the different characters, and his use of the tritone, which is the devil's interval for certain thematic things. And at the end of teaching that class, the students were like, they were so excited by learning the sort of my secrets of why I love that score.
That's amazing.
And it was such a good feeling to see them sparked by something that had been part of my life for so long. You know, it made the whole journey seem important to me.
Yeah.
You know, my exposure to it, my sort of learning about it, and then being able to pass it on in a way that excited people.
Yeah.
Well, that's everything.
Yeah.
That's everything. That's all I ever want.
It's amazing. You got the whole scope from that first love to later on getting that different experience from the same piece of work that someone put so much love and care into. They made this thing, and then it's in your life then and then later.
No, that was a good feeling.
Yeah. David, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you. What a delight to talk with you.
Yeah, it was just very, very nice. I really appreciate it. David's great, isn't he? That was a really special one. I love what David had to say about, you know, everyone getting on the same page and putting on the same show. His showbiz perspective on the definition of success. I mean, like, every show that he was like, and that show changed my life, it was also a massive bomb. And in that same vein, I love how he talked about, you know, letting go of the control and focusing on just the part that he does and not concerning himself with the rest. Life can be bitter and it can be sweet. And this episode with David was a good reminder of, you know, the beautiful things that can grow along with the really painful things. David, thank you for being on the podcast this week. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for 34 years of putting on shows for people. Thank you for passing on the torch to the next generation and, you know, lighting that spark in them for musical theater. And, you know, just thanks for being on the podcast and sharing your journey with us today. I really appreciate it. Alternative titles for this episode could be, they asked for 10 minutes and I gave them 40 and 2 songs. Today's episode was sponsored by Him and Her and produced by me, Ryan Leacock, with music by Gustav. Thanks for the melancholy vibes today, Gustav. It was like perfect. Special thanks to podcast fangirl Amy Esplin, who sent me fresh bread on Friday. It's this service. If you're local, you got to check out Tough as They Crumb, because if you're going to have carbs, like, have the best ones. It was delish. Thank you to you for listening. Go subscribe and like and do all that stuff. Every little bit helps. Have a good week, guys. Show up, do the work.